My name is Naomi Alara Whitman, and I am 29 years old. The year my mother married Vincent, I was 12, small for my age and desperate for a father who didn't vanish when the rent was due. At first, Vincent seemed like the answer to a prayer I hadn't admitted out loud. He fixed our broken garage door, taught me how to check oil like it was sacred knowledge, and cheered at my little league games with a voice that carried across 3 fields. For 6 months, life felt like a commercial for a family we might finally be. Then the script changed. "You struck out again. Maybe baseball isn't your sport," he said one afternoon, casual as weather. When my math grade came back a C+, he smirked over dinner. "At this rate, you'll be lucky to flip burgers." By high school, his favorite phrase turned ritual. "You're just not built for success, kiddo." Every college rejection sharpened his knives. "State school waitlisted you? Not surprised." When community college accepted me, he laughed. "2-year programs aren't real college." Mom would go quiet, stirring her coffee like there was some answer at the bottom of the mug. I learned to study in the bathroom because doors lock. I worked nights at a gas station to cover tuition. Vincent drove past on his way to Meridian Industries, where he'd been a floor supervisor for 15 years, rolled down his window, and honked. 2 notes that sounded like give up. He told Mom I was wasting time on fantasy education. I transferred to finish my business degree. "Business major?" he scoffed. "You can't balance a checkbook." When I graduated with honors, he shrugged. "Participation trophy generation. Degrees don't mean anything." I landed an entry-level position at a logistics firm. "Mailroom work isn't a career," he crowed, gleeful as if disappointment paid his mortgage. So I did what stubborn daughters do. I stayed late. I inhaled supply chain reports until 2 a.m., memorized lanes and lead times and failure points. 2 years in, I earned a coordinator badge and a quiet corner with a view of trucks threading night like needles. Vincent called it luck. At 25, I jumped anyway and launched a tiny consulting firm aimed at manufacturing efficiency. Year 1 tasted like ramen and interest charges. Vincent shook his head at family dinners. "Playing entrepreneur won't pay the bills forever." But obsession has a hum. It kept me warm. I dissected each client's operation until the bones made sense. We rebuilt workflows. Word spread. Clients doubled, then tripled. 3 years later, the revenue sheet whispered 7 figures. Mom's pride was sunlight. Vincent's silence was weathered stone. Then Meridian called. Efficiency down 30%. Their biggest client threatening to walk. The board wanted outside help before bankruptcy made the choice for them. I spent 2 weeks inside that plant tracing waste like crime scene tape. The supervisors, including Vincent, were trapped in 1995, allergic to modernization, fluent in corners cut. I presented my plan to the board. Save the company, double profits in 18 months. The CEO looked like a drowning man glimpsing shore. "I don't want consulting fees," I told them. "I want to buy you." The room exhaled. I laid it out. I'd purchase 65% at market value, inject $2 million for modernization, and personally oversee the transition as CEO. 3 weeks later, ink dried. Ownership transferred. I had the keys to the building where my stepfather spent his days believing I would fail. The night before my first day, Caleb, my boyfriend, the only person who looks me in the eye when I run faster than my breath, stirred onions in my kitchen and said, "Winning and healing aren't always the same thing." "I know," I said, lying to both of us. Caleb's ex-girlfriend, Tessa, pinged me a congratulatory text. She worked PR for one of my legacy clients and had once told me, with a smile that felt like a test, "Every great turnaround needs a villain and a savior. Pick before the press does." I didn't respond. I stared at the Meridian floor map instead, the cross-section where Machine 7 sat like a throne. Morning arrived with steel-gray light. I walked through Meridian's doors, the echo of my heels swallowed by a factory's constant prayer, machines pleading to keep moving. Workers nodded, supervisors scrambled, clipboards multiplied like shields. I kept my pace measured, eyes on the rhythm I now controlled. He was at Machine 7, barking at a kid who looked 19 and terrified. Vincent had gone grayer, but not softer. Arrogance ages badly. He didn't see me until I was close enough to smell the coffee on his breath. "Excuse me," I said. Annoyance glossed his face before recognition cracked it. Confusion, then something like fear. "What are you doing here?" he asked, words clanking out of a mouth that used to tell me I was nothing. I smiled and extended my hand as if we were strangers meeting at an airport lounge. "Let me introduce myself properly. I'm the new owner and CEO of Meridian Industries." Around us, the noise thinned. A few heads lifted. The young worker stopped pretending to fix a jam that didn't exist. Vincent's mouth opened, closed, opened. "That's impossible," he managed. You run some tiny consulting." "I own that firm," I said, showing him the morning's press release on my phone. "Meridian Industries, under new leadership. Local entrepreneur takes control." The headline looked cleaner than revenge ever feels. The plant manager, Donald Krebs, hustled over, breath short. "Ms. Whitman, welcome. Apologies. We weren't expecting—" "It's all right," I said, eyes still on Vincent. "We all have some adjusting to do." "Vincent's one of our most experienced supervisors," Donald offered, like a peace token. "So I've heard." I turned fully to the man who taught me to change oil and then tried to convince me I'd never change anything else. "I'd like to see you in the main office in 10 minutes, I said. "We need to discuss your role in the company's restructuring." He nodded, mutely, almost childlike, then shuffled away, the factory swallowing him whole. The crowd dissolved into whispers. Donald fell into step beside me as we headed for the office building, a time capsule of wood paneling and fluorescent honesty that had outlived its charm. "If you don't mind me asking," he said carefully, "how do you know Vincent?" "Family," I said, and let the word hang there, heavy as a press. In the hallway glass, my reflection looked like a woman I hadn't met yet, someone entrusted with a story bigger than vengeance, a story that might save a place where people still lose fingers to schedules. I opened the office door, set my bag down, and unlatched the folder with Vincent's employment file. 10 minutes later, he knocked on the frame. "Come in," I said, voice steady, hands not quite. He sat. The desk between us was the same one where a different CEO had signed a different set of papers that would change his life. I leaned back in the leather chair and watched him try to decide whether to apologize or attack. "Vincent," I said, "we need to talk." He didn't look at the walls, or the outdated blinds, or the brass nameplate I'd already removed. He looked at me like he was mapping an exit. "If this is about what I said," he began. "Which part?" I asked. "The 15 years of telling me I'd never amount to anything, or the part where you taught kids to work faster by skipping safety steps?" Color climbed his neck. "You were a kid. I was preparing you for the real world." "The real world keeps score," I said, opening his file. Tabs, yellow for performance, red for incidents, blue for complaints. I slid the stack across the desk. Resistant to change, unwilling to learn new systems, clashes with younger employees, multiple reports of unsafe directives. That's not preparation, Vincent. That's negligence with vocabulary. He didn't pick up the papers. He watched my hands instead, the way people do when they don't trust your words. I clicked a remote. The little projector coughed light onto the wall, line graphs diving, bar charts slouching, a red column labeled "Injuries, 18 months." "This plant is failing, productivity down, costs up, morale subterranean. 4 injuries in your section alone, a broken wrist, a concussion. Chemical burns. You remember Timothy Chen?" His jaw tightened. "Accidents happen on a floor like this." "Not like this," I said, flipping to the incident photos. "Not when safety gear isn't on the opposite side of the factory. Not when guards aren't removed to shave a minute. Not when supervisors don't tell 19-year-olds to clear jams while the machine's still live." He looked away, to the window, to the old calendar with a lapsed quarter highlighted in orange. "You came in here to fire me," he said, toneless. "No," I said, and watched his head jerk with the surprise of the word. "If I fire you today, you become a story you tell at a bar about an ungrateful stepdaughter with a grudge. That story helps no one and changes nothing." Silence. Machines murmured beyond the glass, a river under ice. "I'm giving you an opportunity," I said. 3 weeks of intensive training, modern inventory systems, updated safety protocols, real leadership. 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. Exams at the end. Pass, and you're promoted to senior supervisor with a 15% raise. Fail, and you're done. Not just here. I let that sit. Every plant director in 100 miles has my number now. His laugh was short, without air. "This is revenge with paperwork." "This is business with boundaries," I said, "and a lifeline you didn't earn, but still get." He looked at the floor. And if I refuse? Then you'll clean out your locker before lunch. The door clicked. Donald leaned in, apologetic. Ms. Whitman, HR is ready for the all hands at 2, and legal signed off on the new safety signage. Thank you, I said. We'll need a larger room. When the door shut, Vincent's eyes came back to me. What else? He said flatly, like we were haggling over an extra shift. Profit sharing, quarterly, I said, advancing slides. Healthcare upgrades, paid training, tuition reimbursement for relevant degrees, dedicated safety stations per section, interlocks on every guard so you can't bypass them, anonymous reporting with protection, and a monthly supervisor score that weighs productivity and employee satisfaction equally. That'll kill our margins, he said automatically. Happy workers make fewer mistakes and more product, I said. It's not charity, it's efficient decency. He was quiet a long beat. Then, you sound like a brochure. I didn't blink. I sound like someone who decided we don't trade human skin for schedule. His mouth twitched, almost a smile, almost a sneer. And what do you get out of this, besides headlines? I almost told him the truth, that I wanted a factory where 19-year-old versions of me don't learn to shrink. Instead, I said, a company that works. The knock at the door came soft this time. Caleb stepped half in, hesitated, then set a takeout coffee on the credenza and ghosted back out with a nod. No questions, no performance. Vincent watched the exit. Boyfriend, he asked, curiosity cutting through the scorn. Yes. He nodded like he was adding a column to a ledger. He know you bought the place to make a point? He knows I bought it to make it better, I said, and wondered if both could be true. I pushed a single-page document toward him. Performance improvement plan in bold at the top, the spine of a second chance. Sign it. Show up. Learn. I don't need an apology. I need outcomes. He read the first paragraph. The second. The part about peer evaluations and monthly reviews. You'll be breathing down my neck. I'll be measuring what you do, I said, not who you are to me. He stared at the signature line like it might bite. Why offer me anything? Because Mom loves you, I said, plain. And she's been happier with you than she was without anyone. I won't use her as collateral. Something fragile passed over his face. It didn't stay. He signed. The pen left a thin, uncertain trail like a man stepping onto ice. Training starts Monday at 7 sharp, I said, standing. Don't be late. He slid the paper back and rose. At the door he paused, still facing the hallway. You really did it, he said softly. All of it, without me. I didn't answer. He left before I could decide. The all hands at 2 was oxygen and fire. I took the mic without a podium. Eye level with a few hundred lives. I'm Naomi Whitman, I said. I own Meridian now. Here's what changes. I didn't sell it with slogans. I showed them the broken bones in our processes and the bones broken by our processes. I showed them the path out. I announced profit sharing and the safety interlocks and the tuition reimbursement. Someone in the back murmured, "Holy," and cut it off. A woman near the front folded her arms, crying without moving. This will be hard, I said. There will be training and tests and days you want to go back to the old ways. We won't. We're building a place worthy of your labor. When it was over, hands went up. Not hostile, hungry. A man with grease etched into his cuticles asked about childcare schedules. A machinist with a brace on her wrist asked about ergonomic redesign. I answered what I could and promised what I could keep. When they finally filed out, the room felt lighter by a pound you don't measure. In the corridor, my phone buzzed. Tessa, congrats on the buy. If you want to control the story, call me before someone else does. A winking emoji followed, then a link to a trade blog already speculating. Did new owner target family rival? I felt heat rise beneath my collarbones. I typed, deleted, typed again. Not now. I pocketed the phone and headed to the floor. Timothy Chen was at Station C practicing lockout tag out with a trainer. He caught sight of me, hesitated, then gave the kind of chin lift men use when they defend themselves with minimal surface area. I paused. I read your report, I said. What happened to you should never happen here again. He nodded once. Thank you. Hold me to it, I said. If anyone asks you to cut a corner, you come to me. His eyes flicked to the far aisle, where Vincent was talking to Donald, hands oddly still. Will he? He'll train, I said, and he'll pass, or he won't. When I reached the office again, Caleb was leaning against the doorframe, unwrapping a sandwich he knew I'd forget to eat. How many fires? He asked. Enough to warm a small country, I said. He studied me. You going to call Tessa? Maybe, I said, after I decide whether I want a villain in this story. You don't have to pick one, he said. You can pick a system. Fix that. I took the sandwich and stared through the glass at the place where I once imagined revenge would taste like sugar. It didn't. It tasted like responsibility and metal and a kind of hope that hurts the teeth. Behind me, a clipboard scratched softly, Vincent's signature drying on it like wet paint. The first Monday of training looked like a mutiny waiting to happen. Rows of supervisors, mostly men who'd been here longer than I'd been alive, sat with their arms crossed, faces set in synchronized resentment. Vincent sat dead center. He didn't look at me, not once, but I noticed the pen in his hand, clicking rhythmically against the desk like a ticking clock counting down to something neither of us could name. The instructor, a bright-eyed consultant from my firm, began explaining new efficiency protocols. Half the room tuned out immediately. I could see it. The glazed eyes, the silent scoffs. But I also saw one pair of hands taking notes. Vincent's. By the second week, something shifted. Maybe it was the way I walked the floor, quietly, without fanfare, watching, not judging. Maybe it was the way results began speaking louder than my surname. Output was up 12%. Safety incidents had dropped to 0. One afternoon, I stopped by the break area where Timothy Chen was cleaning a small chemical spill. He wore proper gloves this time. Vincent stood beside him, supervising. For the first time, he didn't bark orders. He explained. Slowly, carefully. I stayed hidden behind a support beam, watching. Always double-check the valve, Vincent said, his voice low. Doesn't matter if it costs a few minutes. Minutes are cheap. Fingers aren't. Timothy nodded, focused. Got it, sir. Vincent hesitated, rubbed the back of his neck. And I'm sorry, for before, that shouldn't have happened. Timothy froze for a second, unsure what to do with an apology from someone who used to shout. Then he said quietly, Thanks. I know you didn't mean it to go that way. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stepped back before either of them noticed. That night, at home, Caleb poured 2 glasses of wine and asked, So, are you getting what you wanted? I hesitated. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but watching him try, it feels complicated. Caleb smiled faintly. Because revenge doesn't rebuild anything, but accountability does. I looked out the window. You sound like someone who's never fantasized about an apology. Oh, I have, he said, leaning back. But sometimes the real miracle isn't hearing sorry. It's seeing someone change enough that you don't need it anymore. His words lingered in the room long after the glasses were empty. By the end of the 3rd week, training was complete. Of the 12 supervisors who started, only 8 passed the exams. Vincent scored in the top 3. Donald couldn't stop praising him in the final review session. When Vincent walked into my office for his results, he was a different man than the one who'd signed that paper 3 weeks earlier. Shoulders lower, eyes clearer. You passed, I said simply. He nodded, folding his hands in his lap. Good. Better than good, I added. You're getting the new title, Training Coordinator for Safety and Efficiency, $85,000 a year, plus bonuses tied to the safety metrics you used to ignore. He blinked. That's more than I make now. It's also more responsibility. He stared at the letter I handed him but didn't touch it. You're not doing this out of pity, are you? No, I said. I'm doing it because you earned it, and because I'm tired of hating you. That caught him off guard. You hate me? I did, I admitted. For a long time. You were my first lesson in doubt. Every time you said I couldn't, I carved a vow inside myself that I would. He exhaled, his voice rough. Maybe that's what I was afraid of. What? That you'd become everything I never had the courage to be. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The machinery hummed through the walls like a heartbeat. Finally, he signed the letter. I'll take the position, he said quietly. But not because you're giving me anything. Because I don't want to be the man who breaks people anymore. After he left, I sat in silence. The victory I'd imagined for years felt nothing like this. It wasn't sweet. It was humbling. That weekend, Tessa called. Her tone was bright, sharp, publicist energy. Naomi, I'm hearing whispers. Meridian's numbers are bouncing back. We could do a full profile. Female CEO rescues dying plant. Transforms local economy. It's gold. I don't want publicity, I said. You don't get to choose that, darling. Stories tell themselves if you don't tell them first. And the angle right now? She lowered her voice. Some outlets are framing this as a revenge buyout, that you humiliated your stepfather. My stomach turned. That's not what happened. She chuckled softly. Then help me show them what did happen. Let's make it your redemption arc, not his downfall. When I hung up, Caleb was leaning on the doorway. He'd heard enough. Don't let her use this to twist the story, he said. I can't stop her. Maybe not, but you can choose what kind of story you live, even if you can't control what they write. He was right, again. By month's end, the factory was buzzing like something reborn. Workers laughed at lunch. Accidents stayed at zero. Profit margins ticked upward. And Vincent arrived early, stayed late, and mentored the same employees who used to flinch when he walked by. I watched him one afternoon as he reviewed safety drills with Timothy. There was a gentleness in his gestures, a patience that felt foreign and genuine. He glanced up and caught me watching. For a second, I saw something I never expected. Respect. Not fear, not resentment. Respect. I nodded once. He nodded back. No words. None were needed. When I turned to leave, I overheard him say to Timothy, "You know what the boss taught me? Never let pride stop you from learning." The boy laughed. Sounds like good advice. Vincent smiled. Yeah, it only took me 20 years to believe it. That night, I wrote my first internal memo to the entire staff. It began with, "We are not defined by who doubted us. We are defined by how we grow beyond the doubt." As I hit send, I realized that maybe this story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about renewal. The turnaround hit headlines faster than I expected. Within 6 months, Meridian Industries wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Safety incidents had dropped to zero for the first time in company history. Profits were up 40%. The local paper called it the miracle in machinery. That's when Tessa called again. Naomi, Forbes Local wants an exclusive. They're fascinated by your leadership model. Modernization, empathy, accountability. This could put you on the map nationally. I hesitated. We're barely steady. I don't want to stand on a platform that isn't bolted down. She laughed lightly. It's already happening, darling. I can help you control the narrative. Caleb wasn't thrilled. When I told him about the feature over dinner, he set his fork down. Her angle won't be neutral, he said. You know that. She says she wants to highlight the transformation, especially the human part of it. She's your boyfriend's ex, he reminded gently, and a PR strategist. Her definition of human depends on what sells. I smirked. That's cynical, even for you. It's realistic, he said. You don't owe the world your pain to make progress look pretty. But Tessa was persuasive. She interviewed the staff, filmed clips on the floor, caught moments of genuine laughter between workers who hadn't smiled in years. For a few weeks, I let myself believe she understood what we were building. Then the article dropped. The title gleamed. From Stepfather's Shadow to CEO, How Naomi Whitman Bought the Company That Once Employed Her Family's Skeptic. The photos were flattering. Me in the office window light, Vincent shaking my hand. But the text twisted subtle knives. Sources say Whitman's decision to purchase Meridian wasn't purely strategic. It was personal. An act of poetic justice after years of discouragement from her stepfather, a longtime supervisor at the same plant she now runs. I read the line 3 times, pulse climbing. Personal. Poetic justice. 2 words that made months of reform sound like a vendetta wrapped in lipstick. I called Tessa. What is this? It's a hit piece, if you don't understand branding, she said coolly. Readers love a redemption arc. You come off strong, determined, complex. It's great PR. You made him a prop. You both come out looking evolved, she argued. Forgiveness sells almost as well as revenge. Forgiveness isn't a headline, I snapped. It's private work. Naomi, you can't be naive. The public doesn't care how nuanced you are. They care that you won. I hung up before she could turn my silence into sound bites. That evening, I found Vincent in the training hall, resetting chairs for a workshop. He looked up when I entered. I saw the article. I braced. I didn't approve that angle. I'm sorry. He waved it off, almost amused. You don't need to apologize for people writing stories. I've lived long enough to know everyone's the villain in someone else's version. Still, guilt itched at me. They made you sound like a stepping stone. He smiled faintly. If I was one, I'm glad it helped you reach higher. His grace caught me off guard. I sank into one of the chairs. It doesn't feel right. The article made it look like I bought this place to humiliate you. He studied me for a long moment. Didn't you, at first? I opened my mouth, then closed it. Maybe, I admitted, but not anymore. Then don't let a magazine tell you who you are now. Outside, the factory hummed like a living thing. I heard laughter in the break room. The sound steadied me. A week later, Meridian received an invitation to present at the Regional Manufacturing Leadership Conference, the kind of event Vincent used to mock on TV. The board wanted me to speak. I don't do speeches, I told Donald. Then it's time you learn, he said with a grin. The night before the conference, Caleb came to my apartment with takeout. You ready to face a room full of suits? I've faced worse, I said. Family dinners, for one. He smiled but didn't laugh. Promise me one thing. Don't use the story they printed. Use the one you lived. I don't know if I can separate them anymore, I confessed. Then fuse them, he said. Turn revenge into redemption. You're the only one who can. The next morning, under blinding hotel lights, I stood at the podium with a trembling stack of notes I never looked at. Cameras blinked. Tessa was in the back row, expression unreadable. Vincent sat beside Donald, a lanyard around his neck, pride quietly anchoring his posture. I used to think success was about proving someone wrong, I began, but I've learned it's about proving people right, the ones who still believe in better when no one else does. I spoke of efficiency, safety, mentorship, of transforming not just machines, but hearts hardened by years of cynicism. When I mentioned the training program Vincent now led, the audience applauded. He bowed his head, humble and small in the best way. Afterward, reporters swarmed. Tessa approached last, recorder in hand. Nice speech, she said. You're becoming quite the symbol of reform. Symbols don't fix systems, I replied. No, she said, eyes glinting, but they inspire the ones who can. Vincent joined us then, his tone firm. If you print anything new, print this. She didn't just buy a company. She built a place that makes people proud to work again. Tessa blinked, momentarily disarmed. I might quote that. Good, he said. Quote it right. As she walked away, Caleb slipped his arm around my shoulder. You realize he just defended you to the press? I noticed, I said quietly. That night I drafted a company-wide email. Our past does not define us. It teaches us. The only revenge worth having is becoming someone you're proud to be. When I hit send, I realized how far we'd all come. Vincent, Meridian, and maybe even me. 2 years later, the factory no longer smelled of rust and exhaustion. The walls gleamed with fresh paint. The sound of machinery was steady, purposeful, alive. Meridian Industries had become something few people thought possible, a model of transformation. Vincent was now regional training director, overseeing safety and leadership programs across 4 manufacturing sites. His salary had nearly doubled, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was watching him walk through the plant surrounded by trainees half his age, listening, encouraging, correcting gently instead of condemning. One afternoon, I found him helping a new recruit adjust a gear mechanism. No rush, he told the young man. Slow is safe. Safe is smart. When he noticed me, he straightened with a small grin. Caught me working again, boss? Just making sure the legend still shows up, I said. He laughed, the sound startlingly easy. Old habits die harder than I thought. The good ones, I mean. That evening, I attended the quarterly meeting where Vincent presented his new mentorship program. As he clicked through slides showing graphs of improved retention and near-perfect safety compliance, the room applauded. When he finished, he turned to me. We did this because someone believed we could change, he said simply. After the meeting, he stopped me in the hallway. Naomi, do you remember the first day you called me into your office? How could I forget? He nodded slowly. You told me I needed to prove I could be more than a bitter, small-minded man. I think I've done that, but more importantly, I proved it to myself. You have, I said, in every way that counts. He hesitated, voice quieter. There's one more thing. He reached into his pocket and unfolded a piece of paper, creased and soft from being carried too long. It was a handwritten note. Naomi, I was wrong about you. About everything. I thought breaking your confidence would prepare you for the world. All it did was blind me to how much strength you already had. I'm sorry. My throat tightened. You didn't have to write this. I did, he said, because I spent years trying to protect you from failure. Turns out failure's what taught both of us how to begin again. He looked smaller than I remembered from childhood. Not diminished, just human. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. Not the polite forgiveness that hides resentment under a smile, but the kind that exhales, releases, rebuilds. And I'm grateful too. He blinked. Grateful? Every time you said I couldn't, you made me hungrier to prove I could. You were wrong, but your doubt still built something in me. Maybe that's grace, using pain to grow, not rot. He laughed softly. So, I helped you succeed by trying to make you fail. Something like that. That's the most ironic thing I've ever heard, he said, smiling. For the first time in years, the distance between us didn't feel like a wound. It felt like wisdom. At the next family dinner, Mom cooked too much as usual, filling the table with dishes she swore were for leftovers. Vincent raised his glass. "To second chances," he said, looking first at me, then at her, "and to the people who give them even when we don't deserve them." Mom's eyes shimmered. "To second chances," she echoed. I added, "and to learning that success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about refusing to stop growing, no matter who doubted you." We clinked glasses. Later, as I walked through the factory alone, I watched the night shift begin, new hires stepping confidently into roles once ruled by fear. Timothy Chen, now an assistant supervisor, guided a trainee through safety checks with the same calm Vincent once offered him. When he spotted me, Timothy waved. "Director Whitman, Vincent wanted me to remind you about tomorrow's audit." "Tell him I haven't forgotten," I said with a smile. As I moved past the rows of machines, their hum blended with memory. Vincent's harsh words, the nights of exhaustion, the small triumphs that built the road here. Every sound was proof of something healed. I paused near Machine 7, the place where it all began. The same machine where Vincent once barked orders at frightened workers now bore a small plaque, dedicated to the people who believed change was impossible until they made it happen. I reached out, running my fingers over the metal. For the first time, it didn't feel cold. Months later, a business journal published a follow-up piece. Not by Tessa this time, but by an independent writer who spent weeks shadowing us. The article's title was simple: "Beyond Revenge, How Redemption Rebuilt a Factory." It didn't glorify anyone. It told the truth, the messy, complicated truth of failure, pride, forgiveness, and growth. It ended with a line I never expected to read in print. "Sometimes leadership isn't about power. It's about mercy strong enough to change the people who once broke you." I closed my laptop, tears catching the edges of my vision. When Caleb came home, I handed him the article. He read quietly, then wrapped his arms around me. "You did it," he murmured. "We did it," I said. "All of us." He smiled. "You know, Naomi, some people spend their lives chasing revenge. You turned it into a company policy for redemption." I laughed through the tears. Maybe that's the real business model. Outside, dawn filtered through the factory windows. Workers clocked in. Machines stirred awake. A new day, one built on second chances. And as I watched the first spark of light hit the floor, I realized that the story I thought began with vengeance had always been about grace.